Hey there, Chris Brown here, part-time hobo. San Francisco is one of my favorite cities. In fact, it's one of many hobos' favorite cities. It's tolerant. It doesn't really get too hot there. It doesn't get too cold. It has a lot of opportunities, big rail stations in Oakland and San Francisco. It's a wonderful place, and it has a long and interesting history. Area of San Francisco was originally settled by Native Americans, the Loma and Ohlone tribes that were settled on the banks of San Francisco Bay for many centuries, up until the 1760s, when the Spanish, who had been sailing and looking for good harbors on the Pacific coast, came across the harbor there, one of the best in all of the North and South America on either side. It has a very narrow opening that opens up into well-protected bay. So they, in the 1760s, established the Spanish, a mission there, and they dedicated the mission to the patron saint, Saint Francis of Assisi. St. Francisco, that's where the name comes from. They held on to it as a mission, as an area, until the 1821, when Spain went to war, Mexico for its own independence, and they acquired the territory, and it became Mexican territory then. And they called it Yerba Buena. And this is what it was known as up until 1846, when Mexican-American War took place, and eventually by 1848, the United States took on that area. It was a growing area because of its port and because of its location on the west coast, and so this now became an important American port on the west side. Now this coincided right at the same time in 1849 when the there's gold in them thar hills, was discovered at Sutter's Mill up along the mountains, the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so the gold rush began, and by late 1849, 1850, mostly young men from all over from the east were pouring in, some coming in ships coming around. There was no Panama Canal, so they had to go down to the very southern tip to make the scary crossing there, and then back up the west coast on the Pacific to San Francisco. And so ship after ship was taking the people that were going to get rich. Some others took the overland route, took a little bit longer, was just as, if not more dangerous. Some of them crossing over the very Donner Pass where cannibalism had taken place just a few years earlier. Thus began the rapid growth of San Francisco as a mining town and as a new dynamic place to be. And it was drawing in people from all over the place, including from China, to help build. And they were buildings as fast as they could, again, mostly out of wood. Now, the other thing about San Francisco, and most people are aware of this, is that it's built right on a fault line. The San Andreas Fault and the Hayward Faults come together there. And this is part of the greater Pacific Rim, as we know, that circles almost the entire Pacific oceans, all the way up through Alaska, down along through Japan, and down along through the Southeast Asian side, and on the American side down through Central and South America. This is all one big Pacific Rim. And those rims, as we know, as those fault lines, are prone to crack and break and every once in a while. And as San Francisco grew over the next 50 years, it became suddenly a city of about 600,000 people. Now that's pretty darn big. most of them living in ramshackle this, that, or the other. Suddenly, on April 18th, 1906, that San Andreas Fault, it cracked and it shook that city right down, killed thousands of people. The city burned, those wooden structures burned to the ground, and San Francisco, for all greater purposes, was destroyed. Many, many lives were lost. Well, rather than to just ignore this beautiful harbor and this beautiful area, it was decided we're going to rebuild, and we're going to build better and bigger and better. And that's just what they did, and they found out how to build safer buildings over the years. And so it's a city today filled with skyscrapers and tall, immense buildings. It's also known for many other things, such as Alcatraz prison, one of the most difficult prisons to escape from. Alcatraz was shut down as a formal prison in 1963, but it still attracts many, many tourists and has some great stories behind it. There's Ghirardelli Square chocolates. There is the Mission District. It's one of the most vibrant gay districts and earliest recognized in the country. There's the Haight-Ashbury hippie area, the Grateful Dead. It has lots of different things going on in San Francisco, and that's what I love about it. And that's why back in 1989, my wife at the time, Judy, and I, as we were traveling around the country in a VW bus, let's head to San Francisco and see this city. And it was the fall of 1989, October of 1989, and we were excited to explore this dynamic city. I'd been there a few times before, but we were going to see what it's like. The bonus was there was a World Series game going on between San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's. It was the Bay Series. Couldn't have been a more dynamic and fun time. So it was October 17th. Judy and I had been traveling up in the Napa Valley, then along the coast, and we drove over the big Golden Gate Bridge in the early morning, and we're going to explore this city. And darned if during the World Series game, which is going to be on that late afternoon and evening, the place will be quiet. We can drive out of the city without any traffic whatsoever. So that's what we did. And we went in and we parked down in Market Street in the heart of the city on a 6th floor ramp, got out, rode cable cars, went over to Quaking Tower, which overlooks part of the city and has its flocks of budgies, of parrots, feral parrots. And then in the afternoon, decided let's take the Bay Area Rapid Train, or BART as it's known, under the bay and go see Oakland and Berkeley and check out that campus. Then we'll come home and back to our van and drive out during the middle of the World Series game. And this is what we did, and it was great. We were talking to people about who's going to win and what's going to happen. Went over to Berkeley expecting to see these hippies and free speech, and really all we saw was, well, people with big shoulder pads and in their clothing and big hair, and it was 1989. The style's there. It was relatively tame. 4:30 we decide let's get back, and we jump on a train. We're crammed into this train because a lot of people are going over to to see the game or hang out in the bars in San Francisco. So there was this very dynamic energy going on. We get in, train goes under the bay, and as we are coming back into the station on Market Street, we're just about to get on the escalator going on. At this time, Al Michaels is calling introducing the World Series game. People are driving home on the double-decker freeways they have out there. People are driving home over the double-decker Bay Area Bridge. And right at 5:04, as we're halfway up the escalator, it starts to shimmy and shake and jump, and this we hear like sounds like a train, not from below, not the BART, but something going down the street, and that escalator jumped like nothing I've ever felt in my life. I'd never experienced anything. Neither had Judy, and she grabs my hand and holds it just as the escalator stops. Boom. But it keeps bouncing and moving and rolling. And I didn't know what was going on. I said to her, I think they're just excavating a building next door. I don't know. And the woman sitting next to us said, honey, I've lived here standing next to us, I've lived here all my life. I've never felt anything like that. That is a big ass earthquake. And it kind of slowly rumbled, and there was this quietness for a moment. And then you started to hear car alarms, which were kind of a new thing, start to go off everywhere. They'd been jostled. You hear this murmur and a nervousness. Well, we ran up to the top of the escalator, out onto the street. Felt a few more little tremors, but we ran into the middle of the street. Cars were kind of driving and trying to figure out. Electricity had completely stopped. And there we were, in the middle of one of the biggest earthquakes that had occurred in many, many years, since 1906. That was it. So here it is, middle of the late afternoon, World Series. Can't get any information. There's no radio. Of course, this was pre-internet or any of that, no cell phones or anything. So we just kind of had to speculate that this was a big earthquake and hoping there wasn't going to be another one. We walked around for a while trying to figure out our game plan. We were parked on the 6th floor of a parking ramp. At this time, the bars along Market Street started to pull out their booze and some of their expensive drinks outside. They did not want any further damage, and some of their glassware had already gotten quite smashed. And they're giving away free drinks. And the atmosphere became one of not fun, of course. This was the middle of an earthquake, but one of, well, let's just deal with this as it goes along. We could see in the distance smoke starting to rise from an area that later we found out was the Marina District. We could see some other things going on, what would be the Bay Area Bridge, smoke and things, but we weren't quite sure. We eventually decided we should go back to our van and try to get out of here. Well, we went up to the 6th floor. Of course, there's no electricity. There's no kind of street lights or anything like that. And as we decided we're going to try to drive out of this. Well, what credit to the great people of San Francisco. Eventually, people just started taking over and directing traffic at every corner. We eventually did get out of that parking garage. It took a while, but people were very respectful. One zipper line in, nobody being too aggressive in their driving. And eventually, by 9 o'clock that evening, we made it south of the city by 25 miles. And there was electricity. And we'd gotten out unscathed in the middle of a major earthquake. Haven't been in one since. Don't want to be in one. I hope that San Francisco is able to avoid one in the future, although it's built on a fault line, and fault lines do crack. So it's going to happen again. And it's just not if, but when. And we just hope now the buildings are more secure. The systems put in place to weather a major earthquake are much better. Even in this major earthquake, nothing really fell down. Buildings are actually built somewhat on giant train tracks deep down in the ground, so they can roll a bit if there is an earthquake. But a dynamic city. It is a place that is still one of the most tolerant and giving cities. And I'll tell you, as a hobo, I'll go back there anytime. Well, till next time, safe travels, and have a good day.